This is a view from the virtual cockpit. Many players new to the game do not utilize this feature, but eventually many pilots come to rely almost exclusively on the virtual cockpit during combat. Picture this. You're entering a dogfight with your plane going head-to-head with the enemy. You pass each other with guns blazing, but neither of you scores a hit. Now, where did your enemy go? You can look around for him in the standard side and back views, but there's no guarantee that you'll find him. Let's rewind to the beginning of that pass. Before you get too close, press Alt F1 to enter virtual cockpit mode. When you see the enemy in your sights, press the J key. This is known as padlocking. Your view will move to keep the enemy plane centered on your screen. Flight films are one of the best ways for rookie pilots to learn from their mistakes and become better pilots. During each of your missions, the computer will record the actions of every plane and ship. At the end of the mission, you are prompted to save the original film. If you choose to save it, you can go back at any time to review it and even edit it into your own custom film. You can also re-enter the mission from any point in the film, allowing you to experiment with different tactics in a situation. Using the viewing controls, you can work with the flight films just like a VCR. There are controls for going frame by frame, pausing, and playback at normal, fast, and slow speeds. During playback, the mission will proceed just as it occurred, using the same views you used. You can also take over the mission right away by pressing the Enter Mission key. However, once you do, you will not be able to access the flight film controls. You can also use the mission film's controls to edit your mission. In other words, you can control the point of view from which the action happens, but you can't change the actual events themselves. Use the Activate Editing Board button to bring up the editing controls. Press the right button to permit you to change the camera viewpoint. Press the View button for the camera you want to view the shot from. If you use any of the external cameras, you can use the camera control buttons to move, pan, tilt, or zoom the shot. Once you are satisfied with your new shot, press the play button. The film is edited to include the new viewpoint. Note that you can change the view while the film is being recorded. This allows you to create dramatic camera motions without stopping the film. To stop editing, press the right button again. You can now go through and watch your film in the viewer mode. If you don't like the way your new film came out, go in and edit it again. Remember, none of your changes are permanent until you save the film. This is where your mission begins. If you don't follow standard takeoff procedures, it is also where your mission will end. Launching yourself off a carrier deck inside several tons of metal requires you to have a great deal of faith in your plane and in your flying ability. Generally speaking, taking off is as simple as revving up the engine and releasing the brakes. First, set the throttle to at least 80% power. If you're carrying a heavy bomb load, you may need to set the throttle at 100%. Next, release the brakes. Your plane will begin to move forward. When you have reached a speed of at least 80 to 90 knots, pull gently back on the stick. As soon as you're off the deck, raise your landing gear. Raising your gear reduces the drag on the plane and lets your plane accelerate at a higher rate. During the first few minutes of flight, your main concern should be getting some altitude between you and the ocean. Once you have gained some altitude, begin to turn into formation. During your initial climb, keep your maneuvers simple. Drastic movements in the time right after takeoff are likely to cause your plane to stall, bringing your mission to a quick and soggy end. Landing is one of the most difficult parts of any mission. Add to that a runway that moves and rolls, and it becomes a rookie pilot's worst nightmare. However, with practice comes confidence. Once you are lined up with the end of the carrier, slow to just above stall speed. Make any adjustments gradually. A drastic maneuver will most likely cause you to stall. Next, lower your gear, flaps, and arrestor hook. The plane will begin to slow down, so be prepared. Try to land with a nose-up pitch just past the stern of the carrier. As soon as you touch the deck, cut your throttle and engage your wheel brakes. If you feel that you can't make the landing safely, increase your throttle, retract your gear and flaps, and circle around again. Never force a bad landing. Take one high-speed plane, add several others flying close to it, and you have the potential for disaster. Formation flying was developed to lessen the risk associated with flying in close quarters. Maintaining formation allows every pilot in the group to know where every other plane should be. The first type of formation is the echelon. The planes fly behind and to one side of each other, maintaining a diagonal line. This formation is not recommended for more than 5 planes. The second type of formation is the V. The front 2 planes fly behind and to the side of the lead aircraft. Any other planes extend the legs in a diagonal fashion. This formation is recommended for bomber groups. Planes may also fly in combination formations. For example, a bomber group will typically fly in a V formation, while its escorts fly in echelon formations. The escorts should be positioned 1,000 feet above and away from the bombers in the direction of the threat. This maximizes the offensive power of the fighters and the defensive capabilities of the bombers. There are 4 basic advantages that you should try to achieve before you even pull the trigger. The first is awareness. If you know where the enemy is and he hasn't seen you, you have a distinct advantage over him. There are many ways to gain an awareness advantage. The most common is to fly with the sun at your back. The second advantage is altitude. When one plane is higher than the other, it has the altitude advantage. The higher plane often controls when the fight begins. It also has more potential energy available for maneuvering. Speed is the third consideration. Like the pilot with an altitude advantage, the faster moving plane has the greater potential for maneuvers. However, the slower plane can usually make quicker maneuvers, possibly luring the faster plane into overshooting. The final advantage is deflection. When maneuvering in for a shot, you must consider your course relative to the course of your target. Firing from an angle puts you at a disadvantage because of the uncertainty of leading the target. However, attacking a bomber from the rear will mean you must deal with his tail gun. So remember to consider your target when calculating the best deflection. Strafing can be a pilot's nightmare because it puts him in 2 positions he doesn't like to be in. First, he's low. Second, he's slow. The risk of stalling is very high, and at a low altitude there will be no chance to recover. By following a few guidelines, you can be sure the target, and not your plane, will be the one going to the bottom. First, line yourself up with the target. Try to pick a reference point and stay centered on it. Next, get to an altitude where you're low enough to hit the target with your bullets, but not low enough that you risk crashing into the ground. Adjust your speed so that you'll be able to make last-second adjustments to your aiming. Use the rudder, and don't bank. When you get close enough, dip your nose and fire. Once you stop firing, pull up. One mistake many rookie pilots make is to become so fixed on the target that they end up plowing their plane right into the ground. If you hit the target, great. Get out of there. If you miss, or there are other targets, perform a wingover and make another run. Whether you're flying a dive bomber or a torpedo bomber, you have 2 primary concerns when you're setting up for a bombing run. The first is staying in formation. The second is anti-aircraft fire, or flak. If you're thinking about anything else, stop, or chances are you won't have the opportunity to release your payload. Why stay in formation? That's a question that many rookies ask. The reasoning is simple. There's safety in numbers. If a flight of 3 enemy fighters attack and you are out of formation, you have a much lower chance of surviving. If you've got 2 of your fellow bombers, then the odds become a bit more even. Your second concern is anti-aircraft fire from the target, or flak. Unfortunately, to get an accurate shot at your target, you must fly almost straight towards it at a constant speed. When the AAA gunners on the ship see your flight headed right for them, they've got a pretty good idea that they're the target. So they'll do everything in their power to knock you out of the sky before you have a chance to hurt them. All you can do is make minor course and altitude changes, known as jinking, to deny them an easy target and hope the gunners are having a bad day. Of course, the more you jink, the harder it is for you to stay on target. To become a dive bomber, you have to be a special breed of pilot. Dive bombers are one part calculating genius and one part maniac. Genius because you release your bombs only when altitude, attitude, airspeed, angle of attack, and lead time have all come into sync. Maniac because you throw yourself into a screaming dive at the target while adjusting your flight path, dodging flak, and looking out for enemy fighters. When you're planning your bombing run, you should take into consideration the correct altitude, the course and speed of the target, and the optimum angle of attack. You will probably want to attack a ship target from the rear. This minimizes your exposure to anti-aircraft fire and presents a bigger target, allowing you to attack along the length of the ship. Begin your dive once you are on course and about to fly over the target. You may want to extend your dive brakes to slow your descent. When you've started your dive, begin looking through the bomb sight. Your first concern is the dive angle indicator. If it's nowhere near the center, you'll want to adjust the dive accordingly. Second, line your target up in the sight's crosshairs. Don't forget to lead the target. Finally, watch the altitude indicator. As it approaches the center, you'll be nearing the optimum release height. Once all three are within acceptable parameters, release the bombs. As soon as you let them go, retract the dive brakes and pull out of the dive. Don't worry about turning around to observe. Your job is done, so head for home. When approaching a target in a torpedo bomber, you should always approach your target from the side. If you try to attack a ship head-on or from behind, you'll be wasting a valuable piece of ordnance. Depending on the type of airplane you're in, you'll want to be flying just above stall speed, usually at about 110 knots. Your altitude should be as close to the ocean as you dare, anywhere from 200 to 300 feet. While approaching the target, you can jink to avoid enemy fire, but be careful. At that altitude, you could easily jink yourself right into the ocean. For maximum effectiveness, do not release your torpedo until you are at a range of 2,200 yards or less. If you aren't level, don't drop the torpedo. Any torpedo released from a plane that isn't level will probably end up a rogue and won't have a chance to hit anything. Don't forget to lead the target. It can take several minutes for the torpedo to travel to the target, depending on how far away you released it. Once you've let go of the torpedo, head for home. The fighters will stick around to check out the damage. You'll get a report once you land.